Hello and welcome back to the Winter Show. My name is Paul Davis.
And I'm Joe Longbone. Hello.
It's the last day.
Oh,
I kind of
sad times.
smile and at the same time. Smile because it's been such a wonderful over a week.
Yeah, definitely. 9 days, as you keep saying.
Yes, 9 days. The longest week. And sad times because it's nearly over.
Yeah.
Yeah. But have no fear because we've got still lots coming up today.
And we'll do one next week, won't we, Paul?
You keep saying this. I'm going to be shivering.
Yeah, just rocking backwards and forwards. I'll save it till next week. How's that?
Yeah. How good was yesterday?
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, 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 very good. If you didn't catch it, then you definitely must catch up.
Yeah.
Because it was
on point.
Yeah. As we expect this one to be, and as we expect the one at 7 p.m. with David Collier to be. Yeah. So we're going to finish on a high with the last two.
Definitely are. And if you want to see any of the videos that we've done for the Winter Show, you can rewatch them at any time. So you can go over to our website, which is cabaretphoto.co.uk, click on the link for the Winter Virtual Show, and there'll be a full list of speakers on there, and you can rewatch any of them at your own leisure.
You can tell I can see the comments and you can't. Because Helen Smith has put liking the set and put a Christmas tree, the dancing girls, and a Christmas tree. Cheers, Helen.
I love how we're the dancing girls.
I'm glad you do. Oh dear. The thing is, I look awful in a dress, and I look even worse trying to dance because I have about as much rhythm as a wet paper bag. Leave that to my wife. She's a very good dancer.
Okay.
I'm awful.
Yes.
So, and then hello to Steve, who says afternoon, guys. So good to see you.
Thank you very much for joining, Steve.
Definitely. I think you have the highest commenting rate out of everybody. I feel like we should send you a prize. Not quite sure what that prize would be.
Yeah.
But thank you, Steve. It's always great to see you pop up.
Yeah, absolutely lovely.
It does make life easier, especially when we're just talking into a camera, to see people commenting and saying hello and liking and stuff.
Yeah.
Makes us feel not quite as weird.
Yeah, so
just talking to each other in a TV.
Pop in a hello or give the video a like. That always helps as well.
So. Definitely.
But on to today's show.
Ooh.
So we're going to introduce somebody.
Yeah, let's do this. Click the right button.
Hello,
Marianne.
You're right.
Yeah, not too bad.
I realised I missed
Good to see you.
Out of the darkness. I kind of was like, oh, I think
surprise.
That's been a wild good intro.
Yeah.
So
on a rolly chair.
Yeah. Would that have got into the highest intro? Because you've got David.
No, because David on the banjo pretty much wins every intro, I think.
Yeah. But Mari coming out of the dark.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
If I just turn around, I think I disappear, like sort of. Do I disappear?
You almost do. Great.
Welcome to our prize placement.
Oh, representing.
Yeah.
That's what we like.
Repping Fuji. Oh dear. Right, so we will hand it over to you. We'll drop off the screen and we'll put your slideshow on, and then we'll see you at the end.
Yeah. So if anyone's got any questions,
put them in the comments.
You can put them in the comments and we'll get them to the end.
Definitely. Ask any questions you like. The technical ones are acceptable as well. Right. See you in a bit.
All right. So yeah, thanks so much for coming, everyone. My name is Marianne Chua, and I'm a Fujifilm ex-photographer, and I specialize in weddings for Fujifilm. But I'm here to talk to you today, kind of weirdly, about what it's like being a wedding photographer when basically you don't have any weddings, and essentially just sharing with you what I've kind of learned from flailing around, trying to experiment with lots of photography that I didn't know anything about. And this is a topic that I was thinking of talking about for a while, simply because myself and a lot of my friends, my colleagues, I sort of noticed that we would have this year cycle, like sort of annual cycle pattern, where we would always say that we, were working kind of a little too hard, and we were always spending our time doing our weddings, doing our sort of paid work, bread and butter work. and we never had the time to like do something creative. And every year we'll be like, oh yeah, well, I'm going this year, I'm going to like really focus on branching out and doing this and doing that. And then we get around to summer, and then we're sort of editing in autumn, and by winter we're sort of desperate for a holiday. So it was something that I wanted to sort of try and make myself do, and then make myself sort of talk about it and share what I learned. But also, obviously, right now, it just feels super relevant for this time, because then obviously 2020 happened, and a lot of people, I guess, were forced to effectively pivot for other reasons. So this talk really, like, I'm obviously a wedding photographer primarily, but you don't have to be a wedding photographer to kind of get something from this, hopefully. This should really apply for any photographers who are hobbyists or professionals and interested in branching out into other things. And also, I think this could be useful talk for people who are Fujifilm users with only one camera, if such a thing exists. Simply because I'm going to talk a little bit about how the sort of small, medium, and big options in the Fujifilm range really helped me with this journey. I'm always looking down when I'm pressing my slides, by the way, because I've got two keyboards on the go and I've got two separate screens going here. So I just need to make sure I don't like miss aim. Yeah, so just to introduce you to who I am, if you've not seen my work before or anything like that. I've been a wedding photographer for about 8 years now, full time, if you count 2020 as a year. But before this, I didn't have any formal training in photography. So I spent the whole of my early 20s, and my life goal was to be a clinical psychologist. I went to uni and I did all of that. I basically came out and did absolutely nothing with my degrees. I went straight from finishing them off and then going into paid photography work, essentially, simply because one of my friends on my PhD course said to me, you know, my mum's getting married. She knew I did photography as a hobby, and she said, you know, do you want to come and shoot her wedding and give it a go? And I, at the time, was like, oh yeah, sure. Like, how hard could that be? I thought it'd be a really fun sort of part-time thing, and that sort of evolved into a 7-8 year business, basically. So the fact that I have like no formal training, I didn't do a photography degree or anything, is kind of a lot of why I really wanted to sort of go back to school with photography, and I wanted to sort of go back and explore maybe what appeals to me as a photographer, and see where I can sort of fit in a photography world for the rest of my life. And at the start, like in that first year, I shot a couple of weddings, but also I did a bit of music photography. So I was kind of lucky, and I bring this up now because it is kind of relevant to something I say later. But I did a little bit of music photography for the first year, at a time when I had sort of owned a digital camera for only a couple of months. And but I did find that it's really hard to kind of. I worked out from talking to people there that it's really hard to sort of make your career in music photography quickly. And obviously, I just sort of left uni, so I needed to sort of get a job anyway. And weddings were coming in at the same time, and sort of people seemed to like the sort of work I was doing with wedding stuff. So it sort of naturally fell into this position where I evolved primarily as a wedding and event photographer. And now 90% of my work is weddings. And I do a couple of other things, like I do theatre work, the occasional corporate photography sort of shoot events. But essentially, it's always, you know, sort of documentary, candid stuff, unstage stuff of people at events. And as I said before, even before sort of 2020 hit and pushed us into this sort of weird situation, I definitely, if I'm honest, have gone through several periods of kind of growth and plateauing, you know, throughout the years of being a full-time wedding photographer. And I won't say this obviously happens to everyone, but I think from speaking to a lot of my friends, I think, it does happen to a lot of people. I think partly because when you do wedding photography, you sort of put your effort into marketing or website building or booking and stuff like that. And then you have to, there's almost a bit of a delay from when you do the actual work, the photography work itself. So it takes you sort of a year or 6 months to a year to actually go to the wedding and do the job, right? So at the start, everything's kind of fun and it almost feels like a little bit of a game. I remember it feeling like just this fun mini project. And I was setting things up and building up clients and going to meet people. And then there's a point where, I had to get through the work I'd actually booked in and I committed myself to. And so you go, and then, so you turn your energy into doing that. And then after a bit of time, you sort of think, okay, where do I go next? And you sort of start to meet people within the industry, and you go on some courses and you do some workshops, and you sort of try and find your style, try and find your voice, etc., etc. And then you get kind of more confident in your skills, and then you sort of start to use those skills. But there's a point where, as you keep doing that pattern again and again of sort of learning something and applying and learning something and applying, you then sort of eventually sort of feel like, where do you go from there? So I had hit this point where I just wasn't sure what my next progression was going to be. And then at the same time, you've got loads of new people coming in. I feel like now I'm one of like the old people, even though I'm probably not. And I think naturally, as sort of more successful and stable you get and the bigger client base you build, it's really hard not to overwork, because you don't know what your limit is until you hit it and come back. And then when you're there with weddings, it's like each job is worth sort of weeks worth of income for you. So it's very hard to say no. You know, you're not saying no to one day, you're sort of saying no to weeks of work. So it's quite common, I think, that a lot of wedding photographers who are full-time kind of push themselves into burnout a lot. And you get to that stage where you're a little bit unsure and you know, you think sort of, are you done? So every time when we talk about this, people always say, oh, how do you stay alive? How do you stay creative? Do personal work, you know? That's a really common thing that's said. And it's every year for years, I think 2-3 years, I've been thinking, okay, I'm good. This is the year I'm going to commit to doing this project that I've written out in my diary, blah, blah, blah. And I just never get around to it because of time. And then obviously 2020 has happened. So now the time barrier has been removed. This has been a really interesting year. And, you know, I'm here to share that with you, basically what's kind of happened. So when I thought to myself, you know, I want to sort of experiment with other types of photography, the first thing I did was I looked at the kit that I have. When I started with Fujifilm, I first started out on the X Pro 2. I found that I sort of I wanted some more dials and buttons, basically. I think I prefer things to be quite sort of tactile. Before Fujifilm, I was on Nikon, and so I had the Nikon DF. So that actually almost looks really similar to the X-T2. So I kind of wanted more dials. I switched to the X-T2, and then I upgraded to the X-T3 for the faster autofocus. And so now I use 2 of the X-T3s for my main body of work. And then for sort of personal use or like a fun camera, I started out on the X-T3. Again, I then moved away into something with more dials, so I went to the X-T20. But I did find I didn't really like fall in love with the X-T20. I didn't really get on with it as I thought I should. And I sort of worked out eventually the reason for this is because the handling of it wasn't quite the same. Like the focus point is moved by a D-pad, whereas once they released the X-T30, I remember saying to like the Fujifilm team that, and because I was already with them at this time, but like I remember saying to them, oh, I'm so excited because you just added a joystick, and it sounded so silly and small, but that little thing did make a huge difference for me, to the point that I literally emailed them being like, yay, joystick, because now then it meant that the way that you control the autofocus is actually the same as the X-T3, and it was the same as the X-T2, and it's just what I'm familiar with, and there's less of a hindrance. Like I shoot my main work with 2 of the same bodies, so I shoot with 2 X-T3s, and I can't do 2 different bodies because I need it to feel like an extension of my own hand and my own arm, and I don't want to be putting any brain power into thinking about where a button is or changing settings and stuff. So I almost, when I shoot with 2 bodies and prime lenses, I kind of mirror everything the same, like all the settings are the same. They're just a copy, and all I'm doing is switching essentially the prime lenses when I shoot. So for that reason, I'm just a creature of habit or a bit stuck, but you know, the X-T30 having the joystick was a significant thing for me. And like I wasn't really bringing out the X-T3 with me for personal work because it felt a little bit like bringing out like your paperwork from the office, right? So I wasn't really that you know, the way, I don't know, something about it just felt a little bit like I was going to work. And like I said, when you're shooting all the time, you're sort of thinking you sort of want to break from that, you know what I mean? So the X-T30 was basically perfect for me, and obviously it's got the same sensor as the X-T3. You're producing pretty much like the same images straight out because everything's the same inside. So it meant even little things like I could know how it was going to edit up straight away. I didn't have to worry about things like that. So I started using it. Oh, and also I forgot to say, so I sort of knew it would also be a safe investment because if you're shooting weddings and you do a lot abroad, sometimes it's good to have like a third backup body, because I'll always shoot with 2 on the day and I want that third backup for things like if I'm doing like a week-long you know, wedding away abroad or away in the UK, then the day before sometimes they'll have like little mini family events and you need it to be more discreet, or you need it to be, it's a more low-key thing, you're there in more casual capacity, so you don't want to be there with like the full belt and the full guns out. And so I just take the X-T30 and I use that just to get a couple of extra shots where I know that people aren't rushing around as much, like the events are not as demanding, it's a bit more candid sort of guest reception style relaxed shooting. So I sort of knew it'd be a safe investment for taking it abroad and stuff. And the way it's so small just sort of means I know you can tuck it in your coat pocket. It doesn't add anything to your plane, like luggage restrictions or anything like that. And you can, like here in this picture, I took it sort of hiking on some ice, so you can take it when you're covered in loads of kit and jackets and everything and cold. But when I first got it, I didn't start taking it abroad first. I obviously carried it around the local area first. And I think some of the first things I shot with it were sort of a bit of architecture. I took it around a little architecture walk with a photographer called Claire, and she was showing me a bit about how it works. And I found like just simply by that, by the size, meaning that I was carrying it around a lot more, almost like opened up more doors for me in terms of opened up more opportunities to shoot. And so it really enabled sort of me to start personal projects that had long been sort of written into my diary. And one of them was like, I love primary colors and contrasting colors and stuff. So one of it was just enabling me to set up this sort of Instagram I call Primary Chua, and it's just me taking photos of anything I see that's kind of like got red, yellow, and blue in it. And it's not necessarily interesting scenes or anything like that, but I just kind of like it. So it's just a fun little thing that I do. Another one is like I like dogs on the tube. Like I'm really obsessed with them. And now I have my own dog. I'm always carrying her on the train and stuff. But yeah, that was another thing. I wanted to have something that I carry around me all the time, so I could take portraits of sort of pets traveling the tube in London. So as I was saying about the primary color thing, I sort of knew that it was something that I always loved, and that was from wedding work itself. So when I'm at weddings, if I see those sort of contrasting, clashing colors, I always sort of enjoy that kind of shot. And this sort of leads me to my first tip. Oh, yeah, this will come up. This leads me to my very first tip for you guys. So content-wise, I would recommend when you're doing this journey of trying to experiment and branch out from whatever you currently do, whether or not it's weddings, my first tip is basically start with what already appeals to you. So don't ignore what feels natural to you, what feels comfortable to you in a way. Like changing your style or branching out doesn't mean you have to go fully, like 0 to 60 straight away. When I do talks on marketing, I talk a little bit about sort of branding and how to find your signature style and how to identify it, because a lot of people will shoot and they'll not necessarily self-analyze their photography and see what is their signature. And so I talk about this sort of concept of style anchors, where basically I tell people to pick their favorite photos, and by that I mean not the ones that have got the most Instagram likes or the ones that have the most sort of Facebook attention or whatever. Go for the ones that like really you loved at the time that you took them. So like, when you're on a shoot or something and it's a photo that you were really excited about and you really couldn't wait to get home and see how it came out, that kind of photo is the one that resonates with you. So I get people to sort of pick 5 to 10 of the images that are like that, and I ask them to sit down and put them together and try and work out what the patterns are between them. And when you start to notice like the patterns in your photography, then you should notice that's what your style anchor is and that's what you love. So for me personally, when I do these marketing talks, I've identified from that sort of process that I love things like lots of shapes, bold colors, contrasting colors, juxtapositions in themes in the scene and stuff. But say for example, if you find that you do this and you feel that you notice that you love like abstract light patterns, then take that and use that as your first theme for what you're shooting when you're shooting personal work. And then once you've kind of got comfortable and you're carrying the camera out more and you've sort of started doing that, then my recommendation is obviously then let's try and get out of your comfort zone. So for me, like as a documentary shooter, when I'm at weddings, I don't often like talk to people. I don't really like charm or schmooze the guests. I almoys never interact with them. So I made a conscious effort after I did like a little street photography workshop with Homer Sykes, and I remember I always thought street photography was something that you did where you just observed what was going on in the street, but he pointed out it's either that or you can also like talk to people that you meet on the street. So that day at the workshop, I purposely made the effort to talk to people, talk to strangers around the area, and then I wanted to kind of continue that, right? So I made the effort and thought to myself, okay, I'm going to try and carry the XT30 around and I'm going to take shots of total strangers. So this woman, for example, was like one of the first strangers I took a picture of, and I was traveling in Edinburgh, and it was, I think, at Edinburgh, I don't know what they call it, like, is there National Art Gallery or something like that? Anyway, she obviously perfectly matched the walls. I saw this as a great opportunity. She was there. I did make it easy on myself because she was the first stranger I'd approached, and I was a bit nervous, obviously, and kind of a little bit awkward and embarrassed. And she actually didn't speak any English. She was on a tour bus with a group of Chinese tourists. So I had to use a translator app, and it was a very long, drawn-out process with the mobile phones and the translator apps for me trying to just ask her, like, I like your look, can I take your picture? And it's not obvious in this picture, but actually she's quite, she's like a bit of an older lady, but she had just wonderful style. I just really liked her. And she kind of posed herself in this way, and I just thought it was really interesting and great. Yeah, so I sort of went up to her and asked her to take the picture. And it's not like, it's not like a very fancy special picture, but I was proud of what trying to take that picture encouraged me to do in myself, and what it taught me about, like, sort of going up to people and creating an opportunity for myself. So my next tip for you guys is when you're trying something new like that and you're pushing yourself to try something new, try and do these things one at a time, and try and do them sort of intensely in a block. And the only reason why I say this, and this is something that is kind of from my old, like, research life. When we do experiments, we'll only change like one variable at a time. And the reason why you do that is so that you can see the effect and understand the effect. If you try and do something new and you're shooting something that's like new type of content that you never did before, and you're doing it in a different way, and you're trying to challenge yourself in, and you're injecting, 5 different sort of new things for yourself, it just means that you won't be able to tell what you like and what you don't like about that. Whereas if you almost organize yourself in your head and you say, okay, well, today, this month, I'm going to go out and I'm going to specifically try and shoot on the theme of approaching strangers. Then I know I'm keeping a lot of other things the same. Then I know that if I don't or do like this experience, or do or don't like these photos, it'll be because of that factor. So, this sort of thinking about sort of branching out into new things in this sort of organized way can help you sort of stay focused and motivated, and also help you see your own progress. So when I was doing this time of like wanting to talk to strangers, I literally walked up to people in the park. So this lady on the left was practicing her hoots. She's like a local hoot performer. The one on the right is actually cheating because it's my postman and he does talk to me all the time. So he wasn't kind of a stranger in a way, but it was the first time I'd actually really spoken to him beyond the kind of niceties of passing in the street. And this is during lockdown. So I kind of got him to stand in my back garden and come around the side gate and have a portrait. And then as well as that, it then gave me the confidence to kind of just approach people online as well as in person. So I joined up some local Facebook groups of freelancers, and I ended up sort of meeting this woman on the left who does like some rental property stuff and did sort of branding portraits for her. And then the lady on the right does some furniture upcycling stuff. So again, I approached her and took her portrait. And all of this is just people I never met before 2020, never, would have had a chance to come across if I hadn't gone out and basically actively searched for them. And this one lady was a local lady who makes corsets for like burlesque performers. And this was a particularly interesting one because it was quite like an intensive shoot day. It wasn't just a fly on the wall portrait that we sort of organized. So we spent all day and we really like put thought into the shoot. And she knew that I'd never done this kind of thing before, and I've never even really done like stage portraits before. And because I knew that they'd want it a bit more polished in terms of Photoshop. So in my existing wedding work, I don't actually really use Photoshop a lot. I kind of have like a bit of an anti-Photoshop policy on the principle of kind of the whole ethos of being kind of real and authentic and whatever. But for this, I actually specifically had to learn frequency separation. So it's weird that I was like a wedding photographer for 7-8 years and I never bothered to learn something which I think is quite a sort of start off Photoshop skills. So by going out and sort of speaking to strangers and trying this sort of, on this journey of trying new sort of random things, I thought, even if I never use frequency separation in my wedding work again, that's kind of fine. But it was nice to know now that I'm confident with it and I can use it. So that's my next tip, is basically don't forget to bring all your new skills back into your usual bread and butter. All this practice of all these conversations with strangers has basically became really great practice. And I then, when I went back and did some weddings in between some of the lockdowns this year, I did feel a difference in the sense that I was, I was more confident about like sort of talking to the guests and stuff. And it's something that I forgot over time, but when you are at a wedding, it is actually quite important to sort of make an impression with the guests, because they are basically your next source of income. Like if I know there's some weddings where I've been created a good impression with the guests because I get a lot of referrals, not just from the couple, but also from the guests that are there, from the bridal party, so it is actually quite an important part of wedding photography to be sort of human and not just let the camera be sort of a shield and stuff. So, and I think interestingly, there's this show on Netflix called Abstract. If you haven't seen it, it's really good, check it out. But there's a guy on there who does the portraits for like Time magazine or something. He does like the front page portraits. And I think I remember him saying something about how sometimes he only has 10-15 minutes to get a shot. And his lighting is not necessarily like always complicated or fancy or intense. It's just, but he says what he thinks is key to his work is the fact that he spends the time or has a way that he wants to connect with the people that he's taking a photo of. And he sort of says something about how the human connection and the mood that he puts his subjects in is one of the most important things about his photography. So I remember hearing that and finding that interesting and thinking, okay, yeah, like I think almost not a photographic thing specifically, but almost your sort of social, like developing some of those social skills around how you want to be with other people, I think is quite an important part of photography. And I have noticed, like, generally that, like, not just with weddings, this applies to other things as well. So when I was, sort of traveling about in a country where, I don't speak the language or whatever it is, I noticed that if you do sort of have some sort of social etiquette and sort of consciousness about things, it can actually help you with getting access to things and like having people allow you to take their picture. You know, like it's a different experience if you're just rushing up to people on the street and being voyeuristic about it. It's not the same. You know, you're not going to get that same portrait. You're not going to get the same picture than if you are sort of respectful and mindful and stuff. And I do notice that difference sometimes between me and you know, some other tourists when they're walking around. And I kind of notice as well, like not just the way I choose to interact with people, but the way I behave when taking a shot. So say sort of a couple of us are walking along and we spot the same event happening. I notice that I will, you know, move to a different spot. And a lot of that is because obviously I'm the more practiced, I've got a bit of an advantage. You know, I'm more practiced at shooting things on, you know, London streets for like weddings and stuff. I'm used to moving around, which is kind of leading me into my next tip, which is basically behave in the same way. So this is maybe more of a documentary photographer thing, but if you are the type to fish for shots, or if you're the type to hunt for shots, which is the former is when you're basically waiting in a spot and you wait for a moment to happen, or hunt is when you go look for a moment. If that's what you're practiced at and comfortable with, then start with that as well, because you will be quicker at it. It'll be intuitive in the same way that, you know, I like to use familiar buttons, is because it's intuitive. It saves your brain power for other aspects and other things that you want to do. So for me personally, I'm like kind of a fishing type of shooter. I will see a still environment and I'll know what I want the finished shot to look like, and I will go in place and sometimes wait like a proper full 15 minutes at a wedding, which is, it can sometimes be really disappointing if that thing doesn't happen that you want it to happen. But when it does happen, then it's glorious. I will often kind of wait for something to happen, and then I will know what I want the end photo to look like before it's actually happened. And that's something that's, like I said, with weddings, it doesn't just apply to weddings, it applies to just going around street photography. And also, you know, notice the primary colors here. Also, just not just with the way that you behave, but you also find objects that exist out in the world, if they kind of almost can trigger sort of your habit of how you want to shoot them, right? So say, for example, at weddings a lot of the time, I'm used to seeing the cars, and like I said, I really like this sort of Wes Anderson-y sort of vibe. So when I see a car, I always want to shoot it in this particular orientation. And I sort of knew that when I was traveling, it was just a knee-jerk reaction to go into that same composition every time, because I'm used to seeing cars like this, basically. So my next tip is just remember that the way that people interact with their environment around them is basically universal. And you can kind of bear this in mind when you're shooting and almost choose to merge your worlds. So the way that you compose in a wedding scene or whatever type of photography you do, the way you compose there, you know, you can use that and repeat that in other scenarios, just to see and experiment with how you can get a different shot out of it, but in a way that you are, with using skills that you basically already have, or using an eye that you already have, is what I'm trying to say. So as well as merging like the different worlds in terms of the environment and the objects that are in it, I also would say like merge your time with things. So when I was traveling around, I don't think you have to limit yourself to just taking landscape shots or just taking, you know, sort of documentary of like local culture and people and things like that. I kind of sometimes try to make the effort to organize something a bit more staged. So obviously as a wedding photographer, I'm interested in weddings anyway, but I was traveling to Japan, and I had a friend who lives there, and I sort of said, look, I'm interested in learning what a Japanese wedding is like and how it's different. And so I asked her if, you know, if she had any shoots going on, could I sort of just tag along to one and come and watch and stuff. And sure enough, like, so with the Western wedding dress, when we shoot it, it's obviously usually very shaped and stuff and a little more snug. And the way that we often pose brides and grooms is related to that, and making people look sort of optimally skinny or whatever it is. But interestingly, because the Japanese wedding outfit is like the kimono, so there's like 3 layers of cloth underneath their kimonos. So wherever you turn is irrelevant, because everyone is like a square, right? So everyone's straight up and down. So I just little things that I learned. So, you know, talking to my friend, where I realized she didn't have to worry about that. And often they pose just forwards, because it's like, well, there's no need for you to be like turning with a side angle and leaning out or whatever with the shoulders. It's just not a thing that exists over there. So there's little things that I learned from that experience, which is really nice. And if you don't have any friends who live in the country that you're traveling to, then my next tip would be doing something which one of my friends did when they went out at the same time. like go on Instagram and look at the location bits for the area that you're going to, if you're like in a city, for example. So Shibuya is like kind of like a busy place in Tokyo, and my friends looked under Shibuya for the Instagram location, and they went to see who had kind of tagged themselves in a picture there, and they basically found some local kind of like this young, attractive hipster couple, and reached out to them on Instagram and asked them would they come and be willing to have some free shots to model, so they could have someone to shoot in that environment. So even if you don't have friends there, you can still arrange that, and therefore then you're suddenly getting different kind of shots that are just not just documentary of local culture, local people and stuff. This leads me on to my next tip, which is basically go ahead and ask for things. So like I said, go ahead and ask people for these opportunities and approach them. All my best work is all my best sort of interesting jobs have come from me just being a little bit bolshy, basically, and having balls to ask for things. The music stuff that I talked about right at the beginning. So I like owned a camera for only a couple of months. I didn't even know what like a histogram was, and I didn't even know what a raw file was. And I was there like in this pit with people who had been who were shooting for magazines for a decade and plus, and it's just literally I at the time was doing some student writing for Lomography magazine, and so I basically just emailed the PR office for some of these festivals. And then I didn't ask the magazine permission. I then went back to the magazine and was like, I'm going to cover this for you. Is that okay? I'm sure it's in your best interest. And I went to the festival and said, can I cover this on behalf of this magazine? And sort of like set up that scenario for myself, which is a little bit ballsy, but like it worked. And it got me into these like access to these amazing things that I don't think I'll get again, basically. And then I also work for like this theatre company in London that does live productions of films, and they're called Secret Cinema. And I also got that by this kind of sort of opportunity of just being almost a little bit rude and asking for stuff. So I went to one of their productions as a guest, and they already knew who I was from there because I'd taken a picture as a punter, and they'd kind of used it for something. They sort of roughly knew that I was a photographer, but like I had no connection to them really. And then when they did a production of Grand Budapest, like I said before, I love Wes Anderson stuff. I sort of wrote on the Facebook post, oh, there's no way you can do this production and not do it specifically in the style of Wes Anderson. He's obviously so distinctive. It would be like a bit of a crime if you didn't do it exactly like this. And they emailed me straight away and said, do you want to come and do that then? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come and do it. And then I've been working for them ever since. So I don't know if that's a tip, but like being a little bit out there is a bit helpful. And at the time I had no like experience in theatre generally, like behind the scenes or anything, but interestingly, like a lot of the way I shoot for them is there's a massive overlap between that and what I do at weddings. So it's basically the productions are very similar to like guest candid stuff at weddings, but people are kind of wearing like obviously crazier outfits, and usually the space is a lot darker. I use the X-T3 for most of it, and then I use the GFX for the set photography I do for them. But essentially what they want from me when they're doing the sort of the live shows is they want like a lot of wide scene setting stuff that shows like their set that they've built and like the crowd. They want a lot of close-up emotional stuff that evokes something that they can use social media, and then they want a lot of storytelling documentary that includes like both the main players and the guests. So literally like the actors and the guests, which kind of overlaps with a lot of the way you shoot a wedding, where you want a story with the bride and groom, but you want to also show their guests, right? So and also you've got like for both of them, for both weddings and these production events, you've got a timeline of events, so you sort of learn that you need to be in a certain place at a certain time, and you prepare in that way, right? So yeah, I just sort of started doing this work, and it wasn't like I was trained in it or anything, but I took the skills that I had from weddings and sort of overlapped them. I'm just going to show like a couple of the photos from it because it's just kind of nice and weird and interesting, I guess. We did like Blade Runner, and we did Stranger Things, and we did some fun stuff. So I think because the sort of professionalism and this understanding, like I said, that I had from weddings, because I was sort of applying that at Secret Cinema, that's what kind of helped me sort of become a regular photographer for them. They understand that I understand the concept of a shot list, and they know that I know that I'm there. They know that I understand that I'm there to meet client expectations, and so I know the importance of things like a venue walkthrough. That applies to both weddings and working in this kind of company. So they often get me to do like the branding shots as well, as a result of knowing that I know how to work in this way. Like once the live shows are kind of running, like you can't go back to, I can't go back to my boss and interrupt them and say, what shot do you need now? What shot do you need now? So you need to understand exactly what they want before the production even starts, and then you shoot throughout, and then you can kind of recap at the end and check together. But effectively, you need to learn how to work from that shot list and clear everything up and almost be a bit organized, and then make sure that you meet the requirements at the end. And that is such the same with weddings. You can't, when the wedding is done, you do not want an email from a couple the day after being like, oh, we didn't get this shot, we didn't get that shot. You need to have all the communication skills beforehand to be able to perform well throughout and produce results that will get you jobs again and again. So this leads me to my next tip, which is basically do different roles for the same client. With Secret Cinema, like I said, I started off doing a lot of their live theatre production work, and then they would get me in more and more repeatedly to do the branding stuff, because I understood how to meet their expectations and satisfy their branding clients and sponsors and stuff. And I think generally, like, if you have a relationship with a company or a person or whatever, then see what else, ask them and see what else, what other kind of photography they might need. Because if you know someone and they trust you to do the work and they know your reputation, it's kind of a good chance for you to experiment in a very safe way without having to worry about spoiling your reputation, because they would know that you're new at it, and they would know that they'd be giving you an opportunity. And it could, again, if you do really well, could lead to other work, basically. And as well as working like for doing like 2 different types of photography for the same client, I also often look for opportunities where I am using sort of one type of portfolio to access like other similar types of fields. So, Secret Cinema have quite a good name in London, and having that on my CV meant that I got approached by a theatre that was opening in Soho, and they actually wanted me to come and do their wedding-based stuff that they were looking to host there, which obviously is not really going ahead because of 2020. But the point is, we went there and we kind of set up a little style shoot and did that so they could get photos for their website. And it's just a great example of how, like, one thing, by branching out into theatre stuff, somehow it still managed to lead back into my bread and butter of weddings. And I think when you're doing this kind of work, like, and you're sort of trying to sort of feel your way through these new opportunities, what I would say is make sure there's always a clear exchange. Like, make sure you spell out to them what you're getting back from it, so that you're sort of setting the boundaries of your own time, and you're setting the boundaries of what they can get for free if you're doing anything free or whatever. So as well as doing the new open theatre opening sort of work, I sort of thought about what I wanted to branch out into. I mean, I love movies generally, and I love film and stuff like that. So I kind of knew I wanted to sort of see what it was like doing movie stills. So I managed to sort of wrangle my way and get a friend who was acting in a sort of short film to let me come on and do some of the stills for the short film. So I sort of went on there, and it was really interesting because, again, not something I'd ever seen before. I'd never seen a short or a long or a normal movie being filmed, and so much of it overlapped with weddings. You have to know where you're standing behind. So, like, at a wedding, you know that you would not get in the way of the priest or whoever's running the ceremony. You know when the ceremony or the main event's going on that you need to be quiet. When you're on doing a film set thing, you have to stand behind the main video camera guy. They would almost dictate exactly where you stand. So yeah, not dissimilar from like a sort of a big Catholic church. And I'm used to working with, I knew I was used to working with like artificial light, natural light. So I kind of knew whatever the sort of movie still set would be like, I would know what to do with that space basically. So I had the confidence to sort of try my hand at this, even though I'd never even seen one happen before. I had the confidence to try my hand with that because I knew I had sort of transferable skills from weddings. And also I knew as well I had like the silent shutter, which is the other key thing you need for them. Is either you're working in like a soundproof box or you have something, you need to have silent shutter basically. So yeah, there weren't a lot of differences in the end between the two. And in a way I really liked being on the set because you get something that you don't get at weddings, where you get to see the rehearsal. So beforehand, before the camera's rolling, you'll get to see the actors kind of go through the lines a few times. And that really gives you a sense of exactly where you want to be and frame, and you can check for anything weird in the background and stuff like that, which is not a luck, not a privilege that we have at weddings usually. So I did drop into this a bit earlier, but just to reiterate, really, just talking about the idea of shooting for free at this time, because it's something that when you're looking to experiment with new fields that you don't have any experience or portfolio in, the odds are you may have to do a couple of things for free. So there's a bit, and obviously it's a bit controversial because it's like, you shouldn't work for free. My personal feeling and advice is that it's okay to give something if you know what you want to take. And also, I don't think it devalues like the industry if you are making sure that you're never offering something beyond, or equivalent to what a professional or paid professional would be offering. So if you have a full shoot, I think it's fine to offer like a set limited number of images for free, or you need to say to them that this is, you're able to provide this much, and then the other half of the time has got to be the time that you as a photographer fully get to have the creative direction, for example. So in that way, you're never fully sort of invading in the space of like very professionals. And I think that's like personally, I think that's like an okay way to go about it if you're going to do it, because realistically, you can't sort of walk into every field and expect to be paid if you don't have the experience in it. I think it's quite high risk for liability and things like that. So if you're setting your boundaries and you're making your value clear, you're making your limitations on your free work clear, then I think it's okay to use that to sort of build portfolio in other fields. Just an example of that when I kind of did that a bit. So I was doing a shoot for a client that was hosting an event at a WeWork. And then when I was there, the lady who worked for WeWork themselves, she was like asking me about what I thought about the lighting that was on the presenter. And I was kind of that bullshit thing again. And I just was honest and I said, okay, actually, I think, you need to put a spotlight here or blah, 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 and here and there. And for some reason that worked really well. And she ended up sending me a list of all the internal events that they had hosted, that they were hosting there over the next few months. So I looked at it, and even though this was paid work, this wasn't even free work, I looked at it and I made sure that, like, again, it was something that was going to work for me. And I looked at which brands I wanted to do that was sort of, which events I wanted to do that were brand relevant, right? So, like I said, I love music. It's always interesting to me. So I went along to, I have to do the photography for this Sofa Sounds event, and which is when they host like secret gigs and stuff like that. So it overlaps a bit with the secret cinema style work. All of it's my same, usual audience I'm used to shooting for. So when I was there, then this Afro rave musician, she, I think that's what the genre she calls the genre. I sort of saw her and I thought, I really liked her style. I found her really interesting and just I love her look and everything. So I said to her afterwards at the end, do you mind if I take your portrait on another day and we meet up and stuff? And she was like, yeah, sure. I thought musicians are always kind of want, like some portraits for something, social media and stuff. And she's like, yeah, come over to my flat. I've got a studio there. And I got there and I realized that like a studio to a musician means a completely different thing to a studio to a photographer. So I got there and I realized I'm only 5'3", so we were like in this tiny, like literally like a basement room like this, and I could touch the ceiling above my head. So I'd seen her perform and I'd seen the way she moved and danced, and I thought, I really had all these great ideas that I lined up with her about how I wanted to shoot her moving around. And this space was literally like a meter by meter room or something. And then luckily, again, with weddings, one of the things that I think we are forced to do is we're forced to adapt to shooting situations and meeting a client request on the fly in an inappropriate space. There's so many times when people will be like, oh, we're going to do this group shot and we're going to do it on the staircase. And I'll be like, okay, in theory, that works. Now, obviously, I know years on that you always get a picture of the staircase. There's a number of times at the start when someone would say, let's do it on the staircase. And you get there and the staircase is wildly inappropriate in size. Or people, obviously, because they don't understand the concept of like depth of field, they'll think that it's okay to sort of spray like the entire wedding party across like this really long staircase where the person in the back's like tiny and the person in the front's like got their face right in front of the camera, right? So anyway, I'm used to that kind of situation happening. And luckily from that, I sort of had like the know-how of how to just explain to her, okay, like, oh, this space isn't appropriate for that. I had the confidence to explain to her, we're not going to do, I didn't have to bumble through anything. I just said, we're going to change it up and we're going to do like a tighter shot. I couldn't even do like a half shot with it. It pretty much had to be like chest headshot basically, because that was all the space we had. And it was really good fun in the end. And it was like a very, a sort of two-way collaboration. And, she's going to use some of the pictures for her album stuff, which is nice. So something came out of it basically. At this stage, I kind of want to like just pay a little homage to the GFX, because I have showed you some GFX photos along the way, but I haven't really talked about it the way I talked about the XT30. When I got the XT30, I bought it knowing it was going to be a good and solid investment. Like I knew at the very worst case scenario, even if I didn't do any personal work, I was able to use the XT30 for, my destination weddings and stuff like that. So that was okay. Like I knew it was going to be useful. With the GFX, it was very much the opposite, where I saw it and I tried it and I was like, oh, I really like the look of it, but I have nothing that would be appropriate to shoot it with at this time. So when I first got it, I basically had to like persuade my friends to have their pictures taken with it, because I was like, oh, I need to do something with that. Let's try portraits. Okay, let's just, take some portraits of friends. So the first trip I did with it, I took it to the beach and I met with some of my photographer friends and we had a little play around with it in the really nice sunset, and it's a testimony to this camera to say that I don't do portraits, and I still think they look really lovely. The images look really lovely, and these ones are actually pretty much straight out of camera, like there's not really an edit on it or anything. So I mean, that's how beautiful the GFX is. And I did eventually find that like I said before, I use it now for like set photography and stuff, and I put it on a tripod and I do photos of the empty kind of sets with the show lights all off and stuff. So I have found a use for it now in work, but at the time I got it, I didn't know that was going to be, it was going to be useful for that. So this brings me just to my next tip, which is basically tip 9, which is keep playing with friends. And like I personally think, photo friends, photo colleagues are like sort of more useful than models, because models have a certain way that they know they want to look, or they know how their face works. And you almost want to go with someone that's a bit more of a blank slate. So someone who is comfortable in front of the camera will understand your weird ideas and be game for it, but also not sort of have the predisposition to the way they want to look, or have that investment in the way they want to look. So my tip is really like when you're trying to branch out into testing what you like, go with friends, work together on it, get together as a group, have some fun, play around. I was with these friends here. I was just playing around at this workshop we were at, and I was just using it to test how the light would fall on them. Because when you do weddings, a lot of the time you don't have a chance to like rehearse light, unless you don't have that exact same setup where you'll have like a couple in place all the time. So by testing the light in other scenarios, I know then how it's going to translate if I use it at a wedding. And the same goes for not just artificial light, but also just environmental light. It's interesting to sort of see, and just if you see some cool light on the street or something, be like, oh, can you guys stand in there? And then you'll know how that's going to translate for you when you go into a wedding shoot. And the same is in reverse. So when you're at weddings, and the way that you're experimenting with shots at weddings can also teach you then what how you want to shoot your friends. So I know from weddings generally, as well as like in the primary colors, that contrasting thing. I also like the contrast between like sort of the really dark blacks and the bold colors. So I like that at weddings, and I did find, without really intentionally doing it, when I asked some of my friends to sort of dress up and play model for me with these shots of the GFX, that was what I was geared to. I was always geared to that dark backdrop, like what I've got now, basically. My eyes, I don't know why, it's just my eyes into that. So just to continue with the idea of like what people can do for you, what your existing relationships can do for your photography. If you do anything like weddings, obviously you'll probably know that the common pattern is people get married and they have a baby afterwards. So for many years, like I had a lot of existing clients ask me, can you come and do our family photos? And occasionally, if I had the time, I would do it. But a lot of the time, I'd say no, and I'd actually refer them on to other friends, who specialize in family photography. And I often wouldn't do it. But now, obviously, in 2020, it's been this kind of year where I have all the time. So I started experimenting with family photography this year. And a lot of the way I shoot weddings, part of my ethos is that I'm very much about the people that surround the couple, not just the couple themselves. I don't believe it's just their day. I think it's about a lot more than just the two of them. So I was already taking shots that kind of resemble family photography anyway, especially I do a lot of weekender weddings and like week-long things. So when you have a multi-day affair, the day before tends to often end up looking a bit like family photography anyway. And as a result of that, this year, from using pictures from my what was effectively my wedding photography portfolio, I was able to sort of reach out and get some family clients who actually I hadn't shot the wedding of before. So this is a couple who live near me. It was referred to me from another friend who lives out of London, and obviously because of the COVID restrictions, she couldn't travel down to shoot them. So I was able to kind of get myself some sort of London family bookings. And not just like, wedding clients then translating into family clients, it will translate into any sort of client really. So this is someone who I shot the wedding of, and she needed some headshots for her business. She didn't like the headshots she got at the company. And I said to her, well, look, I don't normally do them and I've never done it before, but if you're willing to kind of do this as a bit of a collaborative process, then yeah, I'm up for trying it. And she was happy to pay me because she'd paid me to take pictures before. Again, like I said, if you're working for the same company, if you have an existing relationship with someone, they trust you. So it's quite important to sort of retain the human connection with your clients on social media and on the day. And I would say as well, like it's really important to if you're doing something new with someone and they know you're new, like don't worry about needing to pretend that you know everything that you're doing. If you do that and you kind of aren't open to feedback and you don't actively encourage them to give you feedback, you're kind of missing the chance to learn something in a safe environment. Like I would rather be told what I've done wrong or what I can improve by someone who knows me and has less stake in the game than if I am doing it for a company that has never worked with me before and I ruin my reputation with that company. Like if I make a mistake with an existing client, she already knows that I do a good job. She knows, she trusts me enough because she's rehiring me, right? So, like just bear that in mind when you're working with someone that you have an existing relationship with. Like, be more open with them and make the most of that. Otherwise, you're sort of missing that chance for yourself to learn. I talked a little bit there about wedding clients and how they will lead into other work, but this is maybe more of a wedding sort of specific thing, but it can go the other way, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So this was a music client, like in that first year when I was shooting some music. I didn't know this, these guys actually like followed my page afterwards. And then 4 or 5 years later, he actually got married. So then I went and shot his wedding. And it's just sort of trying to lead on to my tip that basically everyone you meet is a photo opportunity, especially with weddings in particular. Like everyone kind of, you know, not everyone might need a business headshot, but a lot of people will eventually kind of get married, right? So everyone who you meet, like, you know, hold on to them in some way, like keep that connection going in some way, because you don't know years down the line when they might actually turn into another photo opportunity that is useful to you or exciting for you. And also just not just the people, but also like every scenario I think is an opportunity. And that's the way I see my life right now. So obviously at the start of March in this year, are we still in 2020? Yeah, we are. At the start of March this year, I knew that weddings were going to be banned for like at least a good few months. So the first thing I did was I went out and I looked for an alternative job. And I just managed to get like a supermarket job. I sort of went for whatever I knew was in hot demand at the time, and being a key worker, it was either basically care work, nursing, or supermarket. So I went for supermarket because I thought that's nearer to the toilet roll. And I won't lie, it was amazing. I never had to queue for like 40 minutes to get into a supermarket, so that in itself was just worth it. But whilst I was there, like in the first month, I remember feeling a little bit like I didn't have the motivation to shoot because everything was a little bit like, I'm going to use the word bad in the world, but without saying the word I really want to say, it's not allowed to swear. But anyway, everything was like a little whatever in the world, right? So motivation to shoot was kind of all-time low. There's a lot of, you know, it was kind of a bit of a trauma in a way to like lose your business that was like your whole identity was formed around. But after like a month or two or whatever, I sort of eventually said to my boss, look, there's loads of sort of bursaries and competitions coming up and things where people are wanting to have photos of key workers, and I'm here and I've got this like really unique access to key workers. So you know, I said, can I take some photos of the guys in store? And yeah, sure enough, he let me do it, and I kind of produced a few photos from that time. And I didn't, you know, I kind of wanted to do this sort of raw documentary thing going on, and I didn't manage to get any of the bursaries or the competitions that I'd applied for, that I'd hoped for. But that didn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it did push me to do something at a time when I was definitely struggling to do anything. So it was just really nice to have something that kicked me back into photography after I could not bear to look at my camera for a couple of months. And a lot of these I took with the GFX actually. So I even took the GFX into the store to see how it would be with sort of more documentary shots. But this is my sort of last little bonus tip 11, which is basically set yourself a goal before you're ready to achieve it. So we do this in the running world anyway. We always say, when people are like, oh, how do you get into running? We say, book a race, and then you're going to start running because you'll have no choice, basically. So the same is for here. Like if you see a competition or a bursary, and even if you think, I don't have the content for that, if you enter it, you will then, at the very worst case scenario is that you'll go out and make some content in an attempt to, you know, have something to enter. And even if you don't enter it, or even if you don't get anything from it, that's totally fine, because it still will be a motivator to push you to go out and do something. So yeah, so for example, like this, I never had taken a self-portrait before with like the remote app, and I spent like 6 hours trying to take this one picture of myself in my work uniform at the time, and I wanted this kind of like World War II-esque, like reminiscent sort of picture, Rosie the Riveter thing going on. But because I found out with the phone, if you have gloves on, you can't like touch the screen. So I literally was like kicking it with my heel with the 10-second timer, and then like trying to get into the exact position of like trying to line everything up with the hands and like a little robot like this. And I would probably, as a result, never do a self-portrait again. But it was nice that this situation, you know, thinking to myself, okay, I want to make this shot to enter into this sort of competition thing, pushed me to at least try it for the first time in 7 years. You know, I'd had this app for so long, and I never thought to try it. So it was really nice to at least learn how to do that, and also learn never take selfies with gloves on, basically, in the picture. So coming right to the end of the talk now, and really you could have sort of saved yourself some time if I just showed you this slide, because all of it can be summarized as this sort of doodly infographic, which my message is basically like nothing is wasted. Like everything you shoot is probably useful to you in some way or another, even if you don't know at the time. And I think, you know, a tip that I had from a friend a long time ago who's got really nice work, and I remember saying to him, how do you come up with all these creative ideas? And he said, you know, I just take thousands and thousands of just absolute nothing rubbish images that go nowhere, but I just keep shooting, because just by doing that behavior again and again in all these different environments and taking photos of absolutely anything and not worrying about, you know, what it is, it gives me that practice that leads me back into, then I translate it all back into work. Like it all becomes something that behavior I've learned, or so I've trained my eye to see something different that then translates into my wedding work. So you know, I think that's very much the case. You know, use your wedding or whatever photography genre you do now, use that to push those skills out into things that are new, and then, you know, all those new things, you will be able to translate it back into what you do before. Just a little thing about what's next for me personally. I'm interested in movies, like I said, and one day I would like to learn videography. It's a different horse to doing stills. I have no experience in videography whatsoever, but I can imagine one day when, I don't know when the next pandemic is, but or the next window of time that we have after everything gets really busy again, I will probably, you know, sort of invest a bit of time looking at videography, hopefully. And also the set photography that I do for Secret Cinema, I sort of know that it could overlap really nicely with some sort of interior commercial work that you can do for estate agents and stuff like that. So I know, I'm aware that I would have some sort of portfolio that I could show if I wanted to apply for that kind of work. That's coming to the end of my talk now. And just in summary, basically, get out and try things, you know, overlap your skill sets, take what the existing knowledge and existing skills you already have, you know, overlap your kit usage. Some of your kit's small and big, you may find applies to different sort of types of photography that you want to do. Say yes to all opportunities. Like, you know, we have a lot of time this year, so use that time. You may as well. What else? I don't know what else everyone was doing, baking sourdough bread or whatever. And yeah, just be nice, be open and human with people. And I think you will find that will sort of, again, enable more opportunities for you. So hopefully they know it's the end of my talk, and I should go back to the guards. I'm like...
We just thought we'd leave you there just to confuse you for a bit longer.
I felt like it got darker as I went. I realized the light dropped at this time, so I just... now I can fade out. Like, now I can just...
Fade to black.
Fade to black. Love it. So that was a lovely talk. Really, really was. Lots of information there. Which
oh yeah, that is me. That's the old academic days. I'm used to like 3 hours with just a lot of words. So I'm like, this is not...
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm touching on loads of things there. So obviously your experiences with wedding photography, but also with just your general personal sort of work as well. So it seems that you never put a camera down. Is that right?
Well, this is a funny thing. Like, no, I mean, I think I do. That's the thing. Like, that's before this year. Well, okay, so before 2020. Yeah, it felt a little bit like that because of weddings, because it would be all year. It's not really, weddings aren't really seasonal anymore. They do go throughout. And every time I had the chance not to shoot a wedding or have that weekend off, I would be like, oh my God, I'm definitely not even taking a phone picture. But then this year, I do feel like I have wanted to take my camera with me everywhere. And to be honest, I go in bursts. So I go through, you know, I've given this talk, but I'm not doing it every day, every month. I think there's times when I go through it, and it was mood dependent really, like during lockdown. If I was in a good mood that month, I would go out and I'd just do all these like freelancer portraits, and I'd be going out, and I did that month where I was talking to all the strangers, and because it was new, it was really exciting. And then the next month I was like, I can't bring myself to do anything, but maybe more me and my mood and stuff like that. So yeah.
It was good that you found the inspiration, you know, inside yourself to go out and at least, you know, start doing stuff as well, and especially with like the key worker stuff as well. So, you know, even though I know obviously the idea of it was to maybe get into like a bursary or something like that, but actually just having the images yourself. Yeah. I mean, as we look at them now, we think, oh yeah, that's down the road. That is, you know, what's happening at my street and stuff like that. But obviously when we look at those, you know, in the future and looking back, they're going to have, you know, once again, more of that impact personally, and well as sort of as...
It's like historical data, isn't it?
Historical,
which is interesting about tonight's talk, because he captures it in the hospital. Yeah. Like it'll be interesting to see the difference and the similarities between the two.
I do think it's important to like capture that time, and my boss, I mean, that's partly why my boss was interested in it. That he himself, I think, so they ended up sending those photos around internal with the manager's internal Tesco thingy, because they wanted a documentary of the time as well, because they had to put in so many different measures and they had to operate in such a different way. It was almost like a record of their changes they made, and how it was the first time they'd ever seen all their shelves empty. So that was the only thing I missed, because I didn't take the shots right from the first month, because I wasn't really feeling that motivated for it. But he was saying it was a shame, because obviously I was there when all the shelves are empty of toilet roll and stuff. And he was like, that was the shot that you needed. It was like this crazy lack of
You know, you could just go back and take all the toilet roll off, stick it behind you.
I'd be like, and I did say actually,
yeah, that's true. You're one of those people.
The Tesco stuff did belatedly actually lead to other work, because I've just had a company reach out to me, having seen some of the Tesco stuff that I've been putting on my Instagram, and they've reached out and said they want me to do something similar for them, like documenting their workers and stuff. So that only like the job I'm still sort of talking with. So I think it's going to happen. It does all work.
It proves a point, doesn't it?
It does. It's just like going back to that analogy of like that being cheeky and doing it and just sort of being out there.
But you almost have to have the attitude of, would you rather try and then have that rejection, or always be wondering what if you'd never tried and never built up that motivation and courage to actually have gone out and done it?
This is something that I do have on one of my slide notes, but I forgot to sort of mention it. But I'm talking about strangers thing. I was actually meant to say that, like, the worst case scenario when you approach a stranger is that they can just say no, thank you. And actually, I know that feels really scary socially, but honestly, you would be surprised if you approach people with like a nice smile on your face, and you don't just go up to them and say like, oh, hi, can I take your picture? Don't stop there. Be like, hi, my name is Marianne, like, I'm normally a wedding photographer. I'm actually just going around taking portraits of people on the street that I think kind of look interesting, because I'm kind of bored right now and out of work. So, do you mind if I take your picture? You'll be surprised how many people will say yes to you. And the worst case scenario is they do say no, and that's kind of, actually, I remember I had that fear. Like, I definitely had that fear before this year, and that's why I wouldn't go up to people, because I felt like people would get angry at me or whatever, or just it would be awkward. But actually, it's not. It's just very few people have said no, and even when they do, it's not really that awkward. You're just like, oh, okay, thanks, have a nice day, and then you just walk off. So yeah, for sure. Like,
yeah, no, definitely works.
Are you going to try that around Colin Bay?
Yeah, I think I've been going wrong, because I've just been walking up to people going, picture.
Yeah. With a massive camera around your neck. Yeah. 70 to 200 on.
Yeah.
You mean the camera and being like, can I have your picture? It doesn't have
That's where I go wrong.
Just explain what you're going to use it for and why you're storing it.
Yeah.
Can you sign this GDPR letter, please?
It's a hemorrhoid cream commercial, like featured like stranger on the internet.
We've had some comments. So Helen Smith said, that was so interesting and really useful for a beginner too. And then in the next comment, she said, what would your top tips be for taking wedding photos as a guest?
Oh, okay, yeah. So when I'm at weddings, I'm really amenable to like guests taking pictures. I'm not really one of those photographers that are kind of funny about it, as long as they don't get in my way. You know if I'm in my way because I'll have an elbow in your back.
Or a monopod.
But no, when you're a guest at a wedding, the main thing I sometimes find people are taking shots of their friends, and if I see them doing it indoors, and I know that the main thing people do is they like put their friends with their backs to the window, and usually I'll just be like, let me just rotate you guys 180, and obviously I kind of get them turned around, and they're always with their phones like, oh, that's so much better, and I'm like, yeah.
It's almost like I'm a photographer.
That's what I'm here for. So yeah, I mean, the main thing I notice is guests doing it, but I'm guessing if you have some interest in photography, I mean, that's very much like, you can tell they have no interest in photography. So often they're not looking for the light, they're not using the great window light space. A lot of wedding venues have like really lovely natural window light a lot of the time. So my tip is, if you're taking a shot of your partner in their suit or whatever it is as a guest at the wedding, then always obviously go near the window and stuff like that. If it's that you want to take pictures of the couple, to be honest, it is harder, because obviously the best spot is probably taken by the photographer or the videographer, right? But I mean, it depends what she means in terms of like, is it just to get good shots of the couple? Because a lot of the time it would just be about those key moments and leaning out at the right time, but trying not to sort of, you wouldn't be able to get up from your seat at the ceremony, right? For example. So
I think it's going back to what you said about working for the film shoot, and also working as photographers ourselves in wedding scenarios as well is knowing when you can and can't do stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's like, you know, if you see a photographer go off with the couple, you know, maybe ask before following them and stuff like that. So you know, just so it doesn't cause sort of any tension. But you know, if it seems to be okay, sort of to take pictures, then you know, just crack on.
Yeah, I think one of the tips would be as well. You may or not agree, but if you watch the wedding photographer,
yeah,
because they're going to have a good timeline idea of what's going to happen next. They've already thought, like you said, like twisting to get the right light, or you know, you've decided, right, if I place the couple here, then that light coming through will work with the flash that I'm going to use or whatever. But if you were to watch as an observer, then you would probably pick up on some of the techniques that the wedding photographer obviously don't get in the way, but equally you could get shots from a slightly different angle or be completely opposite to what the wedding photographer's doing and trying to get other shots, like looking the opposite way. So to see people's reactions, you know, to the first kiss or to the first dance, which is not what the wedding photographer is often asked to do, or unless they have an assistant who might be getting that shot. But just tweaking that around. And then also, I think, at least like from a personal experience of being married and looking back at the photos people sent me, was just getting shots that I didn't get to see. And the wedding photographer wasn't there to do that. But, you know, like seeing my friends and family having a great time, just chatting with one another, eating food and things like that. Get those shots. Those are the shots that I really enjoy now when I'm a guest at a wedding and I'm not shooting, and I just take like my X100F with me. And like, it's compact. Nobody really thinks it's a pro level camera because it looks like a film camera, and it disarms them. Like, you can get great shots. Nobody really cares. And I think that would be a tip for me for wedding photography, having seen it both sides, is that just try and get different shots, and shots that the couple would really like to see, that aren't just them standing in front of a cake or at the front of the altar or outside having the portraits done or whatever. So.
For sure, like really good advice. And also, just to add on top of that as well, I mean, like, because I don't, when I do the couple shots, that's primarily my style. I do a lot of documentary stuff. So I would almost never advise anyone to follow me and learn from me for couple shots. But like for documentary stuff, my kind of one big tip I would say that I would do a lot of watching. Like, as you said, you see what is going on, because a lot of the best comes from just that fishing thing, but also, you know, looking for social cues as well, and again using that sort of social etiquette. But a lot of the time when I get really great shots of guests laughing and having this sort of hilarious moment that's going on, I'm only able to get it because I'm taking the time to observe what's going on. And if you just literally like listen to the room, you can hear who's having a loud conversation. You can hear who's having a conversation that's about to get interesting. So it's not just always, you know, using your ears as well as your eyes, I think, in that space. That's where you find, like you say, you were saying about finding the shots that of the fellow guests that the couple may not see because the photographer may be busy elsewhere. That's how you would get that really interesting shot. You know, you'll have a group of friends that are a bit louder and they're playing some sort of silly game on the table. You know, some good action is going to happen there. That's what I'd personally sort of go towards. So if you're looking for documentary, that's something that.
Also, you tend to blend in more when you're a guest, and people don't seem to care that you're going to take a picture because they're like, "Oh, it's not going to be in the wedding album."
So sometimes you might have a slight advantage.
I would argue that's true quite a lot. As soon as you swing a big lens and camera into somebody's face, they're like, "Ah." But
that's the nice thing about
that's the good thing about the Fuji online, though, because it's so sweet.
The amount of comments I've had on my X100 series cameras at the weddings over the past 5-6 years, like it's insane. Like, people pay attention and don't pay attention at all. So it's really good, and it's a great conversation starter, actually. So.
They always think it's film, right? Like they always think it's a film camera. And they're always like to me, "Oh, you shoot film," and I'm just like, "I will pretend to you that I do, but I don't." So.
Although, if you had an X Pro 3. You would not even know.
Not even know. Do you have your favorite part of a wedding that you like to shoot? Is there a favorite part of the day that you like?
I find I do my best work during prep, but that is not really necessarily my favorite part. I think it's just because I'm most energetic in the morning and I'm not tired yet. Like generally the work kind of goes like in this slope as the energy. And then it's like, tea, cup of tea. Oh, wedding food. Okay, then this, that's an honest answer. I do find a lot of my like really top shots come from there. But no, to be dead honest, I really like the bit in between where people are sort of playing games and there's a relaxed sort of reception kind of thing. Because then I don't have a particular event I need to get. Like when you're at the ceremony, there is a little bit of stress because you sort of know, like, okay, I have to get the first kiss and like nothing can go wrong, and I have to get everyone walking in. I find that pressurized, and I almost don't necessarily relax until after I've done the group shots. So I do the ceremony, and then often you'll have group shots, and then a couple shots sometimes happen then or later. But until I've done the group shots, then I sort of chill a bit. And I like the fact as well that people are just a little bit tipsy, but they're like still with it, and they're not like too sloppy. So the pictures are still good, but they're like, they're warm to you a little bit, and they're excited, and then there's obviously like the end of the day. So I do a lot of like party sort of. My brand is very sort of heavy on the party drinking shots. So there's also then the midnight hour, and then right at the end.
Is that like the golden hour but worse?
It's golden hour, wedding photography.
Yeah. The midnight.
There's some, because I do a lot of like weekend, like several day, multi-day wedding things. So a lot of what I call weekender weddings. So I stay over for a few days. And I kind of like the end of the night shot. If I'm staying overnight with them, if I'm camping with them or staying on site, because I feel like that's really like the essence of when everyone's proper leaving and I don't know, just like stumbling up the stairs. I do like that. Not because it's like unkind to the guests, but it's just almost like a really rare view, but it really finishes the story for me. Like when I deliver this sort of highlight slideshow, I do always put something of that end bit in. I think completes it. So yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. We'll just quickly change gear a little bit. I want to talk about the colours that you produce and whether if there's any secrets behind it or whether it is just Fuji doing a very good job.
So I actually get a lot of my wedding photography editing outsourced in terms of like I get someone who does like a lot of the basic for me. So I have a certain look that's kind of like my sort of say preset by now that I've used for like at least a good 5 years after I went through that heavy vignette pink sort of over processed stage, which it lasted about 1.5 years, and then I sort of was like, hang on, why am I doing this to myself? But yeah, I've always gone. I kind of just chose the edit on the basis of I think that's what suited my personality and what suited my couple's personality. A lot of bold colors, a lot of contrast, something quite punchy, but I still wanted it to look, I think for weddings in particular, you need it to look a bit more timeless, and you should have something that isn't going to outdate too quickly, right? So although I think some pictures probably do look better with a more like a heavier edit, a more like some of them would look better with a more light preset or whatever. I don't usually tend to do it just in case it kind of outdates really easily. Now I'm doing family work. I actually realize I sort of need a different edit for that because again, the soft sort of baby newborn thing doesn't really work with that punchy, contrasty colors. Like you don't need to see all the shadows of the baby, sort of thing. So I think it's about like tailoring it for your particular audience. So I wouldn't say there's, it's the ideal way to do wedding photography editing. You'll have other wedding photography styles that will suit a different kind of edit. But no, to be honest, there's not really much of a secret to it. I thought I sort of picked a preset years and years ago based on what I knew I wanted to achieve. I tweaked it a little bit based on how orange I wanted people to be, and greens and stuff, oranges and greens I tweaked. And then I have an editing company that then sort of gets it consistent for me, and then I tend to finish it off. So no, I must admit, not super secret.
I mean, it's a good bit of business advice.
It's interesting to hear that.
It's just that someone mentioned it before. I don't know if it was on live or a conversation off live, but it was a case of, from a business point of view, can I make more money actually going out taking pictures?
Oh, yeah. Versus doing your DIY.
Yeah, that was it.
With Steve Goslin.
Off though, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's a case of like, well, I can spend all this time taking pictures, but I'm going to spend twice the time editing them. Where, if I can outsource that, then it allows me to carry on taking pictures, basically, doesn't it?
Oh my God,
because
100%.
And also, it sounds odd because we so often do everything ourselves as photographers because that's kind of a necessity. Whereas when you move to larger productions of video, you're not doing the sound yourself.
No.
you're going to give it to an editor, even though you probably know how to use Final Cut or Premiere. Then that's going to get handed to a color grader.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many people involved in the whole process. So to understand that you enjoy the process of taking or making the images, and then perhaps you don't enjoy editing, or you don't feel like you're good at it, or you don't get the colors right, or your gear doesn't seem to print the way you want it to. Like, giving it to somebody else to do so that you can focus on what you enjoy and are really good at, and getting other people to help with the process seems perfectly natural in every other aspect of life. But photographers get dead snobby on who edits their pictures. But yeah, some of the stuff like that you see editors are able to do, you know, like repairing images, or you know, adding like that, like pizzazz, awful word, but you know, like taking images that perhaps weren't fantastic, or you'd kind of go, oh no, it's not great, but they see something that you don't and can like pull out. It just makes sense, doesn't it? Whereas so many people like, what? You can't do that. You can't get somebody else to edit your pictures. That's terrible. But
as long as you know how they're going to come out.
It's a team process, isn't it?
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you know who said that, because like outsourcing was like the best thing I did. I done it for years, and it is about admitting that you can give your time and energy to something that you are much better at. And before I did this, you know, I shot with film, so I was never really super interested in the editing. I was very much more about like enjoying being in that moment, taking that picture. And it's just not my forte. And I have sometimes occasionally, like for like a preview shot or something that I need to get out faster than the editor would get out the whole set for. Sometimes I would edit like one shot and put it on my Facebook page. And it'd be really funny looking at it and then getting my edits back and being like, oh, mine is magenta, you know, like, and then being like, oh, okay. And that does sort of bring you back down to earth and remind you they're a professional. They're doing it all the time. That's the only thing they do. You know, in reverse, I probably take a better picture than some of my editors, right? So like, because that's what they're doing all the time. And I think it's perfectly okay to admit it. I know what you mean. There is a kind of a thing where it's like, oh, you have to do the whole complete process. That doesn't happen with so many industries. It's perfectly normal to have multiple people working on the thing. And with an editor, a lot of the time they're just giving you the when you outsource it, they're giving you just the standard color correction. So they're doing it to your style, and it's just about that, almost that monkey work of like just making everything uniform, which is kind of boring. Really a creative choice. It's like, you know, so okay for me. Yeah, I definitely recommend it. Best thing I ever did. More TV
I think it takes quite a lot of strength on your part and confidence in your work to know, right, I know I've done my bit, so I'm going to get somebody else to do the bit that they are better at than me. And also being able to know that you've given your vision to them already. It wasn't that you've just said, here's some flat raw shots, make them pretty. You said, this is my flat raws, which is how pretty much all of my images come out, and I expect the result to look like this. So it's just asking somebody else, like you said, the monkey work, the grunt work, whatever you want to call it, to do it. And they probably have like a loop deck or like a keyboard that's like set perfectly. Their screen is perfect, and they probably don't even look down at anything. They just see the image and tweak, and it's just job done. And then also to know that if you wanted to send that off to print, it's all done ready. And equally, if you're doing a lot of weddings, one after the other, then being able to, because I know what it's like I've often, when we've shot together, you do all the editing.
We've refused to do stuff over the same weekend. So exactly. Like, oh yeah, if we're doing something on like this
Friday, or you wouldn't do the Saturday. Because it takes a lot of time to edit. That's the other thing people don't realize, is especially when I've been shooting and I've got like a million shots, haven't I? Trying to cull through them all. But equally, there's that freedom to know that you've taken your shots and you give them to somebody else to like continue that process, and you can free your mind or go and do something, like go for a walk or go climbing or go shopping or cook, or do you know what I mean? All of these other things that might put you in a better headspace rather than glaring at a screen for another 8 hours or 16 hours or however many days it takes you to do an edit. Like, I think there's a lot of strength and courage in that, and knowing, like you said, your strengths in the right place. So
I think we've got one more time, just a little bit of time just to squeeze in one last question, I think. We had a question come through on a message. Do you prefer using prime or zoom lenses?
Ooh.
Oh, I'm definitely a prime girl. So with my XT3s, especially because of the weight of them and the balance, like I think the zooms are a bit heavier, and it would mean that you're sort of holding the lens in relation to the body. So I find I use like the sort of 1.2, 1.4 sort of range of primes, mostly the 23 1.4 and then the 56 1.2. Mostly the 23, like I would say 80% of the time. And then I use the 16, which just to get a little bit more sometimes in the shot. And then I had the 90 as well, which is the last prime lens I added to my wedding kit. So that's a 90 f2. And that one I wish I had bought earlier, because there were some churches where that's for me more when I can't actually get any closer, like I'm restricted in a church. So I don't get that one out that often, but when I do get it out, it's like, it's such a great lens. It's so fast, so sharp. I kind of regret not owning it earlier, rather than like having shots on the 56 and having to crop in a little bit. So I use that for the XT3, and on the XT30 I use the prime lenses again. I have two, but realistically I might sell one because I don't need the two. So I have the 23 and the 35 f2, so the little conical lenses that are newer. And again, I've tried them.
They got that old school retro vibe.
Which one's getting the boot then?
I think the 23, because that is both my work focal length, and so I kind of almost want to be away from that a bit. And the 35, I think, is a bit more universal for like, you know, it's enough that it does like the landscape and the portrait shots and everything. So I think the 35 is like the kind of equivalent of the nifty 50, right? So that's sort of my feeling on that. But the weight on that is a lot better. Like if I use the 23 1.4 on the XT30, I do then find that again getting top heavy. So I like the lens on that. But I do really have the zoom for my GFX. I started with the prime on my GFX, obviously thinking I'm always primes. I'll start with the prime, but because it's maybe just the kind of the work I am doing with it, when I do the set photography, I have just needed that like sort of ultra wide to wide zoom. And since I bought the zoom for GFX, I got in there. I'm not taking it off. So
is that the 3264?
I think it probably is. It's the one. It's not the super. It's not like the. It's not like the fisheye like getting that wide, but I think it's sort of wide to middle. I've somewhere here next to me, but I'd have to find it. But yeah, I know it's an f4. So yeah.
I want to get
50 mil 1.0.
I've tried it, but I don't have it. I have tried it.
What did you think?
I think personally, it's beautiful and it's surprisingly quick actually. But it's for how like heavy you think it is. You think it's going to be a little slow, like because I feel like the smaller lenses are a bit lighter sometimes. Sorry, a bit quicker sometimes. But it's a bit too heavy for me in the XT3 personally for wedding work.
Sure.
I'll use it for portraits. I wouldn't use it for weddings. It's a little. I don't know. I feel like I am a favor of getting light kit as possible. If I can one hand my kit, that's ideal. So
nice.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
It makes sense having something that doesn't feel the strain, because you're shooting for a very long time,
especially if you're doing it for a weekend.
Yeah,
goodness me.
Like 14 hours a day, like.
Yeah, weekend.
Well, that's brilliant. I think we've managed to get through all the questions.
Just had a few brilliant insight to how you work, some lovely images, keep all options open is a good message. And then Helen, who asked about taking wedding photos as a guest, said, "This is all useful, thanks," and great, thanks. So I think that was as we were talking about the various options when you were at the wedding. So no, thank you very much. It was great to speak to you. So we'll drop you off the screen now and we'll catch up with you in a moment.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Marianne.
Yes.
That's such a good ending. That was a quality ending.
Oh, that got me. Well done. Well done. Thank you very much, Marianne.
Yeah, definitely.
This afternoon. It's been wonderful having her, and great insight into loads of different ways of doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Which has been lovely. So, yes, it's the penultimate episode.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Tonight will be the final. Yeah, I was going to say the ultimate episode. No, because it's like penultimate and then ultimate.
Yeah,
no, the last episode.
The last episode.
So is this the final countdown?
I can put a countdown on somewhere.
Just got the song in my head. So yeah, 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Later, we've got David Collier, who shot black and white in the hospital during the pandemic. But even more than that, he'll be talking about his very obvious passion for photography. And it'll be a great chat between hopefully the three of us. and hopefully you'll find it interesting. And equally, feel free to put any comments in ready for us, or when we go live, pop comments in
you
there.
can start popping in
questions.
comments now if you want. If you're watching this live, of course.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully see you there. You can find out all the information about all the guest speakers that we've had at the virtual show this year by going over to our website, which is cambridgephoto.co.uk. Click on the winter show. Or,
massive banner.
Yeah, well,
it will change next week.
Watching it,
there'll be a smaller one.
There'll be something there, and you'll see a full list of all the speakers that we've had for the winter show, and you can rewatch them at any time.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Great to see your comments, and we look forward to seeing you later on.
See you later on.
Cheers.